I want to show you something really cool. This is the greatest logo in the history of cell phone companies. And I just heard they changed it, which really bummed me out. But when I got invited to talk to a company that had an alien as its logo, I got all excited. So you're really lucky, you're in good hands. Thank you for coming, good morning. I want to start by telling you a pretty sad story. On my desk in New York, I keep this box. And the contents of this box at one point were worth more than 40 billion US dollars. And I keep it there as a reminder to me about some of the important decisions that we all get to make. In 1991 and 1992, unlike most people in this room, I had access to the internet. There wasn't a World Wide Web then, but there was Archie and Veronica and all these cool online databases. And what I did, I was in the book business, I saw this internet thing happening, and I said, I know, I'll write a book about it. So I went to a book publisher, and they gave me $50,000, and I hired 6 people, and we worked for almost a year, and we made a book called Best of the Net. And the idea of Best of the Net was it would show people all the cool stuff that was on the internet. Well, the book came out, this was the t-shirt I made for the sales force, and it was a complete failure. It sold about 1,800 copies. At the same time that I was making this book about the internet, 2 guys in California named David and Jerry were starting a company called Yahoo, which was about what my book was about, but it was a website about the internet. And at one point, Yahoo was worth $80 billion. I figure my half would have been worth 40. The difference between me and them was they knew how to see. They saw what was happening and they built a website about it. I thought everything was a book idea and I made a book about it. My mistake. So here we are right at the edge of a revolution, and what we have to choose to do is see it for the blank slate that it is. What we have to do is understand that we can decide what we're going to build next, and we shouldn't do it based on what we already know how to do. I already knew how to make a book, so I decided to make a book. That when we see revolutions and we get to dance with them, we get the opportunity to make something different, something new. So I need to give you a little bit of history to understand how we got here in the first place. This is the most important person of the 20th century. Does anyone know who it is? Henry Ford. Henry Ford made the world rich. And the way he did that was by pioneering mass production. Henry Ford went to the workers of Detroit and said, if you're used to making 50 cents a day, I will pay you $5 a day to come work for me. How could Henry Ford possibly afford to do that? How could he afford to take people who were making 50 cents and pay them 10 times as much? The answer was the assembly line. He said, come do what I say. If you do what I say ever faster, it'll work and I'll be able to pay you. And we took this idea of the assembly line, this idea that you do a job just like you did yesterday, but ever faster. And we made it the engine for our wealth, because we can afford, if we are running the factory, to build an organization where you come in and do your job, and we make enough money to make it bigger. So this is the River Rouge plant that Ford built in Detroit. It was so big that if you started walking at one end, you would walk all day before you got to the other end. That the model of most companies in Turkey, in the US, around the world is very simple. The model is one or a few people on top who make all the decisions, and lots of people down below who do what they are told. And that's what we taught you to do. We taught you to go to work and do what you are told. And so at the local supermarket, the Carrefour, if the woman on aisle 3 doesn't show up, they don't shut down the supermarket. They just put someone else in her slot. And so the idea of replaceable people is built into our economy. This is the Johnson Wax Factory, built, their offices built in the 1930s by Frank Lloyd Wright. This is the secretarial pool. If a secretary doesn't show up, we just have another secretary do her job. We industrialized the whole world. We said, how do we make it more alike? So if you go to, I don't know, whichever booth at the Grand Bazaar, whichever merchant you find, they're just like the one right next to them. They're all betting that you will buy their average stuff from them today instead of the person next door because they happen to be on your way. I took a picture of this guy sitting on the street. You know, the fact is, he's just waiting for someone to walk by. The idea that you will win because you happen to be local is built in to what we think of when we think of merchants, but it's changing. We're having a revolution. So I want to talk a little bit about revolutions. I don't know if you know what this is. This is called a record album. And you may not have seen one before, but they used to be important. And in 1970, the record industry was perfect. It was perfect because if I liked a record, I might loan it to you, and then I wouldn't have it anymore, and I'd have to buy another one. Right? Or if I played it a lot, it would wear out, and I'd have to buy another one. If I went to buy another one, where would I go? To the record store. We used to have those. And I'd get to the record store, and there'd be hundreds or thousands of titles to choose from that the record industry didn't have to pay for. And I'd turn on the radio in my car, and what would I hear? Music, so I would know what to buy next. And there was MTV, and there was Rolling Stone, and there was all the media, all of which made this industry perfect. And we all know what happened. It went from perfect to impossible. In less than 10 years, from perfect to impossible, right? That every record ever recorded is available to any person on earth for free if they have one of these in their pocket, right? That what happened was we now have more music than ever before, listened to by more people than ever before, by more musicians than ever before, but the music industry is over. And that is going to happen to every industry. Every industry that is based on the model of scarcity, that is based on what we grew up with, the industrial economy, is going to be replaced by something different. And this is bad news. We can admit it, right? And you can say, who thought of this? This is not a good idea. That you worked really hard to get to where you are, and you are not happy with the new rules. And I get that. But I need to explain to you so you will understand how this is shifting everything. So here, my 1-minute history of marketing. It will only take me a minute. It starts with this. This is the first real factory. Wedgwood, China, in England. Wedgwood figured out how to have health insurance, the assembly line, interchangeable people working on the assembly line to make pottery. He did the first retail factory. Once the thing is built up, once your system is working, you need to make it bigger, which leads to this guy, David Ogilvy. If you can't afford him, one of the madmen. Advertising people who figure out how to give you a mascot, a giant talking green man who will help you sell more stuff, or a fish that people can decide to buy and put on their sandwich. But the idea is simple. Promote it, promote it, promote it as much as you possibly can to sell more of that stuff you already make. And so most of you, if you came to hear about marketing, think that what marketing is how do I stamp my foot ever louder? How do I make ever more noise to get more people to know about what I make? How do I make average stuff for average people and get lots of people to know about it? And that worked for a really long time. And now, if you look, Microsoft last year spent more money promoting this device than they made in total sales of the device. That it doesn't work anymore. You cannot buy enough billboards, buy enough TV ads, interrupt enough people to make it pay. So that's my 1-minute summary. Well, I'm not quite done yet, because the other idea is babies. That if you can put babies in your ads, any kind of ads, wrapped in saran wrap, it doesn't matter, that's a good idea. And if you can't put babies in, put in doctors. Real doctors, fake doctors, celebrity doctors, it doesn't matter. Just yell at people. And the problem with the yelling, and I'm very excited about this because I don't think people have heard it yet, is it doesn't scale. That sooner or later, your boss, the one who keeps using this 4-letter word. How do I say this in Turkish? Yeah, it's more than 4 letters. This word gets you in trouble now because the industrial economy of scaling forever doesn't work like it used to. The model used to be run a bunch of ads. Those ads get you distribution. They get you into the store. They get people to know about what you do. That distribution helps you generate more sales. And then, if you're smart, you will run more ads. And around and around and around it goes. Every product you've heard of because of this. Average products for average people, except maybe Pop-Tarts. But everything else carefully chosen to appeal to the masses, because if you're going to do mass advertising, you better sell something the masses want to buy. Okay, so where does this start to unravel? This picture's a little fuzzy. I had a bad cold when I took it. But I show it to you because that product in the center, that blue box. The brand manager for that product spent $100 million trying to get me to buy her medicine. Because she thought that if I would just buy it once, I would stick with it for years to come and she would earn back all of that advertising money. And it used to work. But here's the problem. The problem is I don't have a pain reliever problem anymore. I solved my pain reliever problem 20 years ago by buying the stuff in the yellow box. I don't know what she makes and I don't care. I ignore all her advertising. This is a big deal that most of you are trying to sell a product that doesn't solve a problem people think they have. And so we get all hung up on making our product better, whatever that means. Here's a picture of room 428 at the Swiss Hotel. No, this is room 862, I think, at a place I stayed in Denver last week. All I know is it was dark. Dark and quiet. That's what hotel rooms are supposed to be, dark and quiet. But if all you do is make a hotel room that's dark and quiet, why won't I just buy a cheaper one? Because they're all the same. They're all dark and they're all quiet. No one is going to cross the street to buy something that's just like everybody else's. The typical supermarket in the US has 30,000 items in it, with 17,000 new ones every year. We can no longer do marketing like we used to, which is find some poor schmo, assault them over and over and over again with news about what we do and hope that one day they will buy from us. This is not working anymore because people are saying, I am done. I do not need to pay attention. Industry after industry, people are saying, I will change the channel because we have branded ourselves to death. This is not what marketing is anymore. The other piece of bad news is this. When I started in marketing, when you started, there were just a few places you could put your message, right? There were just a few places where you could show up and say, here I am. But now there's a billion places. The internet is filled with channels. The internet has an unlimited number of places. Every YouTube channel is a network. Every website is a network, right? So if you're an old school marketer, you look at this and say, this is a really bad idea. Or for those of you who want to really have a pity party, there you go. Okay, so where do we go? I can talk about good news from now on. And the good news is this. We now have the chance, for the first time ever, and Turkcell is showing us this again and again, to do marketing a totally different way. It's only 4 words. Treat different people differently. We didn't used to be able to do that. In the Grand Bazaar, you do not know who is going to walk by next. When you run an ad in a magazine, you do not know who is going to read it. But now, for the first time, we know. That if you went to any statistics class, you probably saw this. This is called the normal distribution. The normal distribution says that this group right here is most people, average people, the masses. And there are a lot of them. And so the boss says to you, make me some more average stuff. The boss says, how do we get into the supermarché? The boss says, how do we get more distribution? And that worked for a long time. But what's happening now is the curve is melting. That bit by bit, there are now more people outside of normal than inside. Bit by bit, what we see is that the weird outnumber the normal. Let me tell you how this works. She gets a tattoo. She thinks she's really hip. She shows people she has a tattoo, which is fine, until one day she goes online to tattoos.com and sees that you need 15, 20 tattoos to be hip. So now she's over here. That person over there goes down to the Bosphorus in the south and starts fishing, goes to the store, there's only 2 fishing rods, buys one, that's the end of it. Unless you go online to the fly fishing website, and you see that there are 300 kinds of fishing rods, including the ultra-lightweight bamboo one made by hand in Belgium by monks, and now you're all the way over here. And so what we see is that the people in the middle are really good at ignoring you. You cannot reach the people who want to ignore you. But the weird people, in every segment, the weird people are listening. The weird people care. The weird people will pay the money. So the goal is not to make some sort of clever ad campaign that'll go viral on the web and reach everyone. The goal is to seek out people who want to go to the edge. Look at this list of brands. All around the world, every one of these brands is making a big deal because every one of them is on the edge. Every one of the new brands that we all talk about, every one is not making average stuff for average people. They're making edgy stuff for people who care. Now this is hard to swallow because what you got taught is that what human beings are good at doing is acting like fish at the aquarium and following each other and doing what they are told. That that's the way we were raised, to do what you are told, not to be weird, but to be normal. Well, I live in a place like near Grand Central, and sometimes the inside of Grand Central Station is like Grand Central Station. And what you'll notice is that there are thousands of people walking around and no one bumps into anyone else. That in fact, what human beings aren't good at is, we're not good at following instructions, we're good at figuring out where we want to go. We're good at finding our own path. And most of all, we are good at finding connections. That as you look around this room, you know people here. There are people here you trust, there are people here you talk to. That human beings, more than any other species, are good at connecting with one another. And so I am arguing that we are leaving the industrial economy, the one we all grew up with, and entering the connection economy. That connection is where value is created. Matt Ridley famously said that there isn't one person on earth that knows how to make a computer mouse. There is not one person who has plastics and metallurgy and supply chain and software and hardware expertise to make this. We are only able to create all the things in our lives now because we work together. That connection is the race that's on now. That connection is what creates value. So the connection economy is based on coordination. Today is Wednesday and you are all here. You will not be here tomorrow. You were not here yesterday. Someone coordinated this event and created value by doing so. Number two is trust. That you look around and there are people here, even if you don't know them, who you trust enough to talk to share an idea with. The third one I'll take a little credit for is permission. The privilege, not the right, but the privilege of talking to people who want to be talked to, of marketing to people who want to be marketed to. If you say no one wants to hear what I have to say, I say make something else. And the fourth thing is the exchange of ideas. All of us are clearly smarter than any of us. That the Turkcell Academy proves to us that as we exchange ideas, value is created. But here's the question. Excuse me, sorry. What is all of this based on? I think it's based on two surprising facts, two surprising foundational things. Generosity and art. No one connects to a selfish person. No one connects to someone who just wants to sell them something. And art, because no one connects to the boring. No one says, I want to connect to you because you are just like everyone else. We connect to something that I call art. Art is the work of a human doing something that might not work. Art is what we are organized to do deep down. So how does this work in real life for your project, for your organization? There's a restaurant in Brooklyn, New York, called Brisketown. Opening a restaurant anywhere in the world is an insanely risky venture. To open a restaurant, you need to spend a lot of money on real estate and hope that people will come. That is not what Daniel Delaney did. Daniel Delaney went on the internet and sold his barbecued brisket secretly online, in pop-up parties, in people's rooms, in apartments, until he had sold thousands of pounds of brisket, until he had built an organization, an environment with thousands of customers, and then he opened the restaurant. And of course it worked, because once you have thousands of people who trust you, of course it's going to work. Here's a question. The first person who had a fax machine, what exactly did he do with it? I'll let you think about that for a minute. I know it's early in the morning. The thing you do when you get a fax machine and no one else has one is you have to tell other people to get a fax machine because it makes it work better for both of you. Bob Metcalfe coined the term Metcalfe's Law. What Metcalfe's Law tells us is that a network gets more powerful the more people who are on it. That's why everyone has a smartphone, because smartphones work better when your friends have smartphones. So if we look at the London subway map, what we see is that the most valuable stations, the best place to open something, is where there's a hub, where there's a lot of connection. If we look at the map of the internet, the same thing is true, that the most valuable websites are the places where connections are made. So let's think about Istanbul for a minute. Why is it here? Istanbul is one of the oldest major cities in the world. It's a city that, for me, represents where we are going. Because when you look out the window, what you see are connection. What you see is a city physically based on connection. That Istanbul is here, not in Sweden, because here was where the crossroads were. So when we think about the future, it's not physical, it's based on ideas. So when ideas come to Istanbul, when ideas come to your organization, people will follow those ideas. When we build an organization that's at a crossroads, we can make a difference. But I have to go back to that voice in your head that says, wait a minute, I get that other people should make ideas, but my job is to do it as written. My job is to follow instructions. My job is to make my boss happy. So you've probably heard this piece of music before. What you may not know about it is that right there in the middle is this symbol, which is called the fermata. And the fermata is musical notation not for play it as written, but for play it the way you feel it. That what Beethoven was saying to the musicians is, it's up to you. Play what's in your heart. So my friend Ben Zander, the well-known conductor, he plays it like this, which a lot of people say is wrong. It's too fast. He doesn't get it. But the fact is, Ben Zander is invited all over the world to perform, because he's not an average conductor performing average music for average people. He has a point of view. He is not part of the flock. He is the rare bird going in the other direction. He is a weird musician making weird music for people who choose to hear it. Many of you have been in this meeting where you're talking about pricing and market share, and everyone else is at $99, and the sales guy is arguing that you go to $98. Only if we lower the price can we get more market share. And the CFO says, no, 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 that's not going to work. We need to raise the price to get more profit. But if you're the same as everyone else, if you're making average stuff for average people, why on earth would anyone pay extra? They won't. No, the only way that they're going to pay extra for your cell phone service or your walnuts or your insurance is if you're the only one. If you're the only one who can bring them this connection, because we're now in the connection economy. So here are two companies, TripAdvisor and American Airlines. Who made more money last year? Who made more money the year before? Who's going to make more money next year? I'll give you a hint. It's not the bus company that flies airplanes around. It's the company that's in the connection business. Because there's only one place I can go to connect with 40 million other people who are traveling. There's lots of other places I can go to get on an airplane. That's changing everything. We are now in the connection business. So if you think that average is the answer, that averaging up everything will win, that's not where beauty lies. Beauty isn't in being the most average. Beauty is in being alive. Being alive, or as the Japanese say, kamiwaza, godlike, myth-like, full out. That's what we choose to connect to. Someone who's going to the edge. I love this video of a cheetah running. Do you think the cheetah is saying to himself, oh, my left arm's really bothering me, or I wonder if I'm holding my head up straight enough? No, the cheetah is running full cheetah, right? There's no discussion. The cheetah is just present. And my friend Amanda Palmer, who ran the most successful music Kickstarter ever, she doesn't have a lot of discussion with herself about, do I think the fans will like this? Do I think they will like that? Should I do this? Should I do that? No, she is full Amanda, fully present, Kamiwaza. Frank Lloyd Wright designed one of the most famous buildings of all time in 15 minutes, without a lot of meetings with engineers, without a lot of meetings with the building department. He played it the way he felt it. He didn't play it as written. So this idea of flying closer to the sun, higher than we dare, doing something that takes us to the edge is really scary, because we now live in a place where this is a real sign. Who else's risk are you supposed to play at? Right? That we're not going to connect to you just because you're doing your job. We are going to look for people who have grit, for people who say, no, I don't do it that way. Oh, I hear you, but it's not for you. That grit, that's the only thing Steve Jobs had. He wasn't a great designer. He didn't know how to program. He was really good at saying, no, we don't do that. He had the grit to care enough to be wrong and to fail. Because if you're not prepared to fail, you can't ever hope to succeed. So the model is now, how many seeds can I place into the world? That's how dandelions thrive. Right? Elephants have one baby at a time. Dandelions have 10,000. There are way more dandelions than there are elephants. Now, if you're afraid of flying, I apologize. Don't watch this video. But for the rest of you, these are actual 747s coming in for a landing at an airport in New York. What you'll notice about them is they are dangerously and dramatically off course until the last possible minute. But the pilot doesn't come on and say, ladies and gentlemen, we're off course. We're going to go back to Istanbul and start over. They adjust. That what pilots understand is that it's okay to be wrong if you can fix it. And in the world of connection, fixing it is easier than it ever used to be. The model used to be, we have something you don't have. There is a scarce supply of pomegranates. There is a scarce supply of insurance policies. There's a scarce supply of eyeglasses. But in the connection economy, everything we care about is unlimited. Unlimited number of people to follow on Twitter. Unlimited number of people to friend on Facebook. Unlimited number of connections we can make. So if we're in a world of unlimited, we can't win by saying, no, 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 you can't have this. We win by saying, here, I made this. Which leads to this next big idea, the idea of tribes. That what the connection economy is built on are tribes, groups of people who share a uniform or an attitude or a goal or a culture. You are a tribe within this room because not everybody in Turkey, not everyone in Istanbul cares about this, but you do. You came. And so you share, look around, everyone's wearing almost exactly the same clothes. Was there a memo? Don't wear a prom dress, don't wear a bathing suit? You knew what to wear because you're part of the culture, right? We grew up with only three: a spiritual tribe, a work tribe, and a community tribe. But what's shifting now because of the connection economy is the number of tribes is going through the roof. Here in Istanbul and around the world, there are the red hat ladies, women of a certain age who get together over lunch, have a few martinis, and get all uppity. In Hawaii are the Ironman triathlon red hat guys. These guys pay $15,000 to fly to Hawaii to compete in the triathlon. What, they don't have roads at home where they live? They don't even like the swimming part. Why are they coming here? Because all the other guys are here. They come to be with each other. And in Portland, Oregon, these red hat guys train all year for Christmas. The training is a big part of it. The training means the world to them because it means to be together. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to time you on this, so let's see if you can follow these instructions. Ready? Go. Okay, stop. 9 seconds. That was terrible. One group actually took 28 seconds. I was sweating bullets. The record just so you know, for Europe is 5 seconds. So you're just a little bit behind. Here's the thing. Every group I've ever challenged to do this has pulled it off. Every group has successfully clapped in rhythm. And I don't tell you, everybody, let's clap like this. How did you know to clap fast or clap slow? Some groups clap really slowly, others have it very fast. How did you know? Who stood up and said, follow me? The CEO's here, you didn't follow him. How'd you know? You knew because that's what human beings do. That's what we're good at. We're good at figuring out what everyone else is doing. We're good at getting in sync. Not in sync with everyone, in sync with our tribe. So what's your job in the new connection economy? It's to find a tribe to connect them to each other and to you, to communicate to them, to commit to where they are going, to be clear in the way you talk, to build a culture of what it means to be in this tribe, and to challenge them to go to the next level. Tribal leadership is totally different than building an industrial entity. Totally different. But if you look at that blank slate and say, I'll just write a book about it, you'll end up with a really expensive t-shirt instead of making the impact you are capable of making. Here's the thing. The Beatles did not invent the teenager. They just showed up to lead them. Bob Marley did not invent the Rastafarians. He just showed up to lead them. So there are these groups of people who are waiting for you to make a difference. I want to tell you a really poignant story. I heard from Nathan actually at 3 o'clock this morning again. My friend Nathan went to work in San Francisco for the SPCA. Now, what you may not know is that animal shelters in Istanbul, in Dallas, in Houston, all around the world, their function, written down, is to find dogs and cats, take them off the street, and kill them. In the United States, every year, about 4 million dogs and cats are killed, usually within 24 hours of being taken off the street. And if you walk around any place in Turkey, you don't see very many wild dogs. You don't see many feral cats because this process is going on. Nathan went to work at the SPCA. He wasn't in charge. He didn't have any authority. He didn't have a budget. And he saw this was happening. He could not abide it. He wanted it to change. He went to his bosses and they said, be quiet, don't do anything. So he went to the people of San Francisco, but not all the people, just the weird people. The weird people who cared about what he cared about. And he said, can we fix this? And in less than 90 days, he had all the money and all the volunteers he needed from the weird people. And within 90 days after that, San Francisco became the first no-kill city in the world. Not one dog or cat who's healthy has been killed in San Francisco since that day. And you say, well, that's easy, it's San Francisco. Well, he left San Francisco and he did it again in North Carolina, and he did it again in Tompkins County, New York, and he did it again in Reno, Nevada. And now there are 500 cities in the United States and more around the world that are part of this movement, that are part of this tribal connection. Because one person with no money and no power stood up and said, follow me. He didn't tell people how to do it. He pointed in a direction where it could be done. But at the same time, we're sitting, wait. I need to do what I'm told. Here, do me a favor, raise your right hand as high as you can. Okay, now please raise it higher. What's that about? Why didn't you raise it all the way the first time? The reason is because that's what you were trained to do in school. That's what you were trained to do by your boss and your coach. That as soon as we put in everything in the industrial economy, someone says, give me more. So we hold a little bit back. We go to school and we hold a little bit back because that's what we are taught to do. We are taught to fit in and do what we are told. But fitting in and doing what you are told will not lead to you becoming a leader. Because leaders cannot be told what to do. They are the people who say, follow me. So let's make sure we're understanding where we are. For 1 million years, the way we fed ourselves was by hunting. That's how human beings survived. We hunted. Only 10,000 years ago, directly related to the history of Istanbul, we invented farming. Only 10,000 years ago. And only 200 years ago did we invent jobs. The idea that you would get money to do what someone else tells you to do is brand new. 500 years ago, the unemployment rate in Europe was 0. And the reason it was 0 is there were no jobs. Jobs hadn't been invented yet. And now jobs are going away. There are tasks, but jobs are going away. And they're being replaced by what I call art. Art is the bravery to do something that might not work. Art is the guts to connect. So when I say art, you're thinking of this guy, right? You're thinking of Jackson Pollock. But here's the fascinating thing. Jackson Pollock had a brother. Jackson Pollock's brother was named Charles Pollock. Here's his self-portrait. Charles Pollock is not famous because Charles Pollock was a painter, not an artist. Charles Pollock painted just like his teacher painted. He painted just like everyone else painted. Joseph Beuys was an artist and felt William Shakespeare was an artist with words. But you'll understand this if you think about Marcel Duchamp. In 1917, Marcel Duchamp put an upside-down urinal into an art exhibit, and he caused a riot in France. Riots in the streets about what he did. The second person to install a urinal into an art exhibit was a plumber. And that's the leap. The first person makes art and causes a riot, and the second person is a plumber. There's a village in China called Dafan where they paint 1/3 of all the oil paintings in the world. The same painting over and over again. They paint it as fast as they possibly can. You can buy the Mona Lisa for $29. This is not art. This is a painting. This isn't worth $29. It's a copy. And most of you go to work every day and paint copies. Most of you work for organizations that are trying to do what they did yesterday, but faster and cheaper. And it's so easy to believe it's not your turn. This is my favorite picture in my whole presentation. This is the Solvay conference that took place in 1927. Physicists were there. You might notice Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Niels Bohr. What's fascinating about this picture, 17 people in this picture won the Nobel Prize in physics. And almost all of them won the Nobel Prize after the picture was taken. You didn't get invited because you won the Nobel Prize. You won the Nobel Prize because you got invited. So look around the room. You got invited. You're here. That's the point. There's a blank slate. What are we going to do with it? Some of you want a map. Some of you say, okay, I get this. Just tell me step by step how to do this. Where are the instructions? And the thing is, I can't give you a map. I can't even give you a fictional map. And the reason is there is no map for art. If I can tell you how to make art, it's not art anymore. It's back to being in the industrial economy. The whole idea is you're in the business of making a map, not following one. This is hard. This is a real book. People pay money for a book on how to raise invisible sheep because we're afraid of making a mistake. We no longer pay extra for competence. Competence is now a click away. I can get a competent person to do something cheaper than you. And now here comes the internet. You've seen the video with the free hugs movement on it, which is pretty funny and clever, unless you're in the expensive hugs business. And the people in the expensive hugs business say, this isn't fair. People are selling competence too cheap. Get used to it. When was the last time you saw a travel agent? They're all gone, just like the music industry. One after another, competence is going away. If all you make is average, you got trouble. What are the bottled water guys going to do? Make it wetter? They actually tried this, but it didn't work very well. But the idea is that if you are focused on perfect, average, polished stuff, you're in trouble. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a huge Superman fan. The reason that Superman works is because of kryptonite. If it weren't for kryptonite, the thing that might kill him, Superman would be boring. The thing that interests us is that dance on the edge. As Kurt Vonnegut famously wrote, what we have to do is throw ourselves off cliffs and grow wings on the way down. That the internet shows up and says, if you want to write, write. If you want to talk, talk. If you want to share your ideas, share your ideas. If you want to teach, teach. We're giving everybody a microphone. We're saying you don't need to be Seth Godin to put a course on the internet. You can put a course on the internet. You have a song, put it online. You have something to say it. You want to innovate, go ahead. All the gatekeepers are gone. There's no one left to say no to you. That also means there's no one who's going to say yes. And that's really hard to get your arms around. Because when we get rid of the gatekeepers, we also get rid of the people who pick you. So innovation comes along, and we say, go ahead, try it. And you probably work for someone who says, wait, this is really important. Failure is not an option. Go ahead and innovate, but don't be wrong. And if someone says failure is not an option, they have also told you neither is success. Because all innovation is failing over and over and over again until you figure out something that works. So we have to get out of our industrial perfect mindset and shift gears to what the connection economy cares about. The guy who invented the ship also invented the shipwreck. That's just the way it works. Now, most of you used to have one of these, a BlackBerry, may they rest in peace. And what happened was, we gave the BlackBerry to people at work, and we said, here's this device. Every day or so, just check on it, make sure everything's still okay. So you're at home and you go, I wonder if everything's still okay. Yup, everything's still okay. And then about 10 minutes later you go, I wonder if everything's still okay. And the next thing you know, you've been standing there all day looking at your BlackBerry. No one ever did creative work, ever, on a BlackBerry. And the reason is you can't do creative work if you're standing there wondering about if everything is okay. That what happens is we have to figure out how to deal with that voice in our head. That voice that is heckling us, that is yelling at us, that is pointing out it's not going to work, that our new project is going to fail, that an alligator is going to bite us, that we're going to fall off a cliff, that a shark is going to land on our house if we just have the guts to launch this thing. That in the back of our head, we have this voice that's been amplified by all these years of schooling that this isn't going to work and we are going to be in trouble because we are going to be caught out as flying too close to the sun, seen as the fraud we are, and it's all over. So you know what I'm talking about. Your cell phone rings, you see on the caller ID, it's your boss's boss. Do you say, oh good, the promotion I've been waiting for? Or do you say, uh-oh, they finally figured out I'm a fraud. Uh-oh, I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to get a reference. I'm never going to get another job. I won't be able to pay my rent. I'm going to be evicted from my home. I'm going to lie on the street, starve to death, and be dead. From ringing on the phone to dead in less than a quarter of a second. That's how the brain works. The lizard brain, the voice in the back of our head, Steve Pressfield calls it the resistance, is busy saying to you, do not leave the village, because a saber-toothed tiger will eat you. The lizard brain is saying, just like it says in all wild animals, keep your head down. Don't screw up. Don't get called on. In a few minutes, we're going to do Q&A. I'm going to say any questions, and no one's going to raise their hand. And then at the end, when we're out of time, 18 people are going to come over here and say, can I ask you a question? Why didn't you ask me a question before? Because the lizard brain doesn't want you to. The lizard brain is hardwired to make you act like a sheep. That's why sheep act like that, because they have a lizard brain. It keeps them alive. The problem for humans is what keeps us alive now is bravery. What keeps us alive now is connection. What keeps us alive now is art, none of which make the lizard brain happy. I don't know if any of you have seen one of my favorite movies, Singing in the Rain. What you may notice about this movie is that during the key scene, the whole time, he has an umbrella. But it's not called Singing with an Umbrella. It's called singing in the rain. The rain is the entire point. And so lots of what you spend time on at work and in your back of your head is, oh, where can I get a better umbrella? I need a better umbrella. It might rain. And my argument is connection comes from vulnerability. The vulnerability of saying to someone, here, I made this. Of opening yourself up, not the stupid trolling criticism from anonymous people. You don't need any of that. But opening yourself up to having someone say, it's not for me. And then you can say, it's not for you. I didn't make it for you. And then go to the next person and say, here, I made this. Because if we're going to cater to the weird, if we're going to connect to people who care, we have to be willing to fly in a slightly different direction. So while you think about that seagull, I want to shift gears 2 more times as I wrap this up. There's an element of connection that comes from generosity. In London, there's a coffee shop called Proof Rock. And what the owner of Proof Rock has is one of those frequent buyer cards where if you get 8 punches, you get a free coffee. You've seen these things. In his case, you get the free coffee if you visit his 8 biggest competitors. If you go to the 8 best espresso bars in London and get a punch and come back, he'll give you a free coffee. Now, do you think he called up all his competitors and said, I'll do this for you if you'll do it for me? Of course not. He just did it because you feed the tribe first, right? You feed the community and then eventually the community comes back. He cares more about coffee culture than he does about keeping you in the store. That is a very difficult thing for industrialists to get their arms around. 3 years ago, I was super lucky. The theater was this size, and I was in the front row to see Lee Von Helm play from the band. Lee Von Helm, shortly before he died, he was a genius. And just before the concert started, I looked up, and on keyboards, on a Saturday night in my little town, Donald Fagen. Donald Fagen, half of Steely Dan. Now, if you're an MBA like me, you're doing the math, and you say, Steely Dan, he must have $50 million in the bank. And I say, what is Donald Fagen doing on a Saturday night in this little theater? How much did Lee Von Helm possibly have to pay Donald Fagen to come play? And then I said, idiot. He didn't have to pay him anything. Because Donald Fagen says to himself, if I don't play this Saturday night, I will never get this Saturday night again. And if I don't play with Lee Von Helm now, I will never get to play with Lee Von Helm again. He didn't have to pay him anything to make his art, to feed the tribe, to be part of the connection. That in an era of abundance, more connections with the right people matter a lot. So when we think about all those meetings we have to go to, if we're not approaching it with a scarcity mindset, but with his abundance mindset, things change. Last story has to do with an airline that doesn't fly this route anymore, much to my relief. I live sort of near Boston, sort of. So if I took the flight to Boston and it worked, I would get there in half an hour. But lots of times it didn't, and I would circle the airport and think the whole time I should have driven. If I drove to Boston, I'd be in traffic, and I think the whole time I should have flown. So I was always unhappy every time I went to Boston. So I take this flight to Boston, and I get there in 30 minutes. It was a triumph. On the way back, it's night. We land, it's 9 o'clock, and we circle the White Plains Airport for 2 hours until we run out of fuel. And then we make an emergency landing in Albany, New York. Now, Albany is a little bit of a pit, and I'm not happy to be there. It's 11:30 at night, and the pilot comes on, and she says, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be on the ground for about an hour and a half, but I think about 1 in the morning, I'll be able to fly back to White Plains. Well, here's the thing. It's only an hour drive from Albany to White Plains. So I go on my laptop, and I get the last car that Avis has. And I put the laptop away, and I stand up on the plane, and I say, ladies and gentlemen, I got the last car that's driving, that's available, and I'm going to drive to White Plains, where my car is. I already paid for the car. I got 3 empty seats. Who wants a free ride home to White Plains? No one raised their hand. As far as I know, they're still in Albany. And I spent the whole drive home thinking to myself, Why didn't they get off the plane? And then I realized what the problem is. The problem is this. We have been trained to stay on the plane. Because if you stay on the plane, it's United Airlines' fault. If you stay on the plane, it's Turkish Airlines' fault. If you get off the plane, it's your fault. And so no one wanted to get off the plane. I have a blog post I just wrote about where mediocrity comes from. And I want to argue it comes from 4 places. Number 1 is deniability. This is not my job. Number 2 is helplessness. I am not allowed to fix this. Number 3 is contempt. They don't pay me enough to put up with this nonsense. Someone else needs to take this risk. And the last one is, I might get in trouble. It might not work. I know all 4 of these feelings, and they are real, but that doesn't mean that we have to accept mediocrity. David Rakoff wrote an essay before he died about going to the movies. He went to the theater is completely empty, he sits in the front row. Just before the movie starts, this woman comes all the way down, right to where he says, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" And he looks around like, "What?" And right there in the movie theater, he has an existential crisis. Is this seat taken? Do you know how many people want your seat? Do you know how many people want the privileges you have, the learning you have, the connections you have, the insight you have, the trust you have? You don't have a job. You have a platform. You have a platform to do a different kind of work, a different kind of art, a kind of leaping. We can look at the economy and the interest rates and everything else and say, this is really bad. Or we can say, this is the chance of a lifetime, right? That this is the chance, first time ever for me, for you, to do this kind of work, to make art and give gifts and be generous and do work that matters, to ship things and to make a difference, to fly closer to the sun. It may be that the wax will melt, but it's still worth the journey because you do not have to do it alone. Look to your left and look to your right. The Hong Kong Cavaliers are here. There are people running organizations that care about this, that care about building connection and building trust, and are doing it with passion, right? With a passion that matters because they are doing work that people care about. So if you want me to put it in writing for you, I will. That what I'm saying to you could not be more clear. The audience, the customers, the community are asking you to lead them. I hope you will. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it. Thank you.